Hello and welcome back to the series Masters of the Chessboard, where we are looking at the famous Richard Reti's book, Masters of the Chessboard, going through each of the games in that book one at a time and looking at Reti's analysis of those games. This is game number 12, where we are looking at Steinitz's game still. Steinitz has the white pieces, and his opponent, Augustus Mongredien. I'm assuming that's how you pronounce his name, but I really have no idea. The game starts off with e4, and we have g6, the modern defense. The first time we've seen this. The aim is to develop the bishop to g7, fianchettoing it, which will place it on a long diagonal. And with a bishop on g7, it would place a lot of pressure on the center. And the aim of this opening, according to Reti, is to develop your pieces in ways which really do attack the center as quickly as possible. It reminds me of a quote by Nimzowitsch, I believe, where if your opponent has a center, you have to attack it with all of your fury. And I think this opening is very similar to that. You give white the center, but you are developing your pieces to attack it with as much power and force as you have got. Now Steinitz plays the principled d4, taking the center. It's up for grabs, so he takes it. Bishop to g7, and now c3. And Reti comments that this move is very typical of Steinitz. Moves like c4 or f4 would have given white more of the center, but it would have left the pawns a little bit weak and would have offered black some opportunities to try and attack it. c3 instead is just more solid, and this bishop is now staring down this line of pawns, and it's not as effective here. We see b6 attempting to fianchetto this bishop, bishop to e3, and here note how Steinitz wants to play his knight to d2 in order to defend this e4 pawn, because bishop b7 will attack the pawn, and Steinitz wants to defend it with knight to d2, because the knight can't go to c3. There's a pawn in the way. But if he plays knight d2 now, then how is this bishop ever going to get out? It's blocked in. So here Reti comments that Steinitz is playing quite precisely, attempting to coordinate his pieces as best as possible. He plays bishop e3 first, allowing the option to still play knight to d2. His opponent continues with bishop b7. We have knight to d2 as intended, defending the pawn. d6, knight g to f3, e5, and now here Steinitz takes. And Reti comments that this appears perhaps to make black's position a little bit easier. However, Steinitz wants to avoid black having the opportunity to take on d4. So after something like bishop c4, e takes d4, e takes d4, c5 is the move quoted by Reti. It's attacking the center even more. And this is what Steinitz wanted to avoid. He wanted to stop black from having any opportunities to break in the center. So to do that, he took on e5 himself. D takes e5, d takes e5. We have bishop to c4, knight to e7, and then queen to e2. And here Reti comments that we again see Steinitz is delaying castling. He doesn't want to miss the opportunity to castle on the queen side if the position calls for it. He also notes the position of white's pieces and pawns. We have a pawn on c3 and a pawn on e4, and a knight on d2 and a bishop on e3. This is really quite common for Steinitz's games. It's seen very often, and because of that, this game is almost a model game for Steinitz's setup. Now here, the black player castles kingside, and now h4. Now this sort of attack where you are almost pawn storming the opponent, it wasn't really seen that often in Morphy's time, or at least in Morphy's games. Morphy preferred a lot more to try and exchange the pawns in the centre to open up his pieces. Morphy preferred an open centre, because then his pieces would have a lot of open files and open lines to try and attack the enemy of king. However, Steinitz often preferred the closed centre, or a centre where there isn't as much going on, and to attack on the wings. Now here, Reti comments that Steinitz played h4 straight away instead of castling, because if he castled, black would have the opportunity to play knight to d7, and now h4 doesn't quite work, because after knight to f6, h5, black just takes the pawn. But by playing h4 straight away before castling, the knight can't get there, because knight to d7, h5, knight to f6, and the knight's not in time. The pawn can take or can push. So in the game we see this happen: knight to d7, h5, knight to f6, and h takes g6, opening up the h file. Knight takes g6, and now castles. Now here, black plays c5, and Reti comments that black's position is just terrible. The only real option for black is to simply push this bishop off this diagonal here, and to do that, black intends to play a6 and b5. And Reti saying this position is terrible for black is supported quite heavily by the computer. The computer analysis at least chess.com's computer analysis give its white +4, so a piece and a pawn, even though the material is equal. And it's mainly because this bishop is eyeing up this diagonal. It's fantastic here. This rook is really active, but this bishop isn't really doing a huge amount, and neither is this one. And here, Reti plays knight to g5, and now that's another piece that's active. This queen is also ready to come in. White's position is just coming to life. Now here, black plays a6, intending to kick this bishop away. It's worth noting that if they tried to play h6 to kick the knight away, we'd see a nice little combination of knight takes f7, rook takes f7, now bishop takes h6. And we see this quite often where the rook would sometimes recapture, allowing it to be pinned, and you just don't take the rook. You keep the pin, you keep it there. Because this rook's not going anywhere, it's pinned, it's stuck, you can take it when you want to take it. So instead we see bishop takes h6, bishop takes h6, rook takes h6, and now if the move given is king to g7, we'll then see rook d to h1, and we can see this rook is under attack, the bishop's ironed straight down here, the rooks are down here, and the queen is also ready to try and come in, at least once this knight is taken away. And so this is just lost for black. There's going to be loads of tactical opportunities here, and black's king is just wide open. So black doesn't play h6, doesn't try and kick away the knight. Instead they play a6, intending b5 to kick away the bishop, and to try and get some counterplay on the queen side as well. But here we see knight takes h7, and a beautiful combination which finishes the game off. Knight takes h7, now rook takes h7. After king takes, we see queen h5 check. Now this knight that was here is no longer defending the square, the queen can get into the game. We see king g8, rook h1. Now here, this pawn is pinned, so queen takes g6 is a potential option, but after queen f6, white hasn't really got sufficient compensation. So here, if queen takes g6, queen f6, white just hasn't really got enough compensation. White's up a pawn, and that's about it. There isn't really enough for white here. So instead, we see rook to h1, threatening checkmate. rook to e8, giving the king a bit of breathing space. And now we see queen takes g6, again utilising this pin. But now queen f6 doesn't quite work, because we see bishop takes f7 check, queen takes f7, rook takes h8, rook to h8 check. The bishop can't take because it's pinned, so the king has to take. Now queen takes f7. And here black resigned. Although black currently has 2 rooks for the queen, black's bishops are just really weak. This bishop is eyeing up a pawn that's protected. This bishop is doing literally nothing. And black hasn't actually moved this rook at all yet. This bishop is on pre. Black's position is just miserable, and it's going to be quite easy for white to win this now. And to prove that, the computer valuation is plus 6.37 to white. And so that's why black resigned. So that is game number 12. Another Steinitz game. I think we've got quite a few more Steinitz games to go. I'm not too sure when the game's finishes. I think we've got quite a lot of Steinitz games actually. What game number is this? Game 19. So yeah, this is game number 12. So we've got 7 more games to go for Steinitz, and I quite like his games. His setup with these pawns and a knight on d2 I quite like. I haven't really seen that much myself before, so it's quite interesting. And the frequent castling queenside and pawn storms it's always a bit of fun. But anyway, that's game number 12. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you next time. And if you like this video or this channel, please like, comment and subscribe. If you've got any feedback or any requests, please just drop a comment and I'll try and see and get back to you. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you next time. Goodbye.